Good evening, hi. I wasn't sure I'd do a video today, but I was wanting to carry on with the Dewi Evans Daily Mail podcast one. And I've just been thinking about all day that there's this part of it that's earlier on that I've covered already, which is something I keep going back to all the time, which is who chooses the frame, who chooses the parameters of the investigations, who's doing that. Not who says who does it, but who actually is doing it, and where does it come from. So I went back to Evans's quote at 14 minutes 20, the Daily Mail podcast interview. I always start coughing when I try to do a video. It's probably nerves or something. Evans says at 14:20, said, "What was crucial in our investigation was that I told the police, look, send me the notes of every baby who's died. Send me the notes of every baby who's collapsed or deteriorated between early 2015 and July 2016, emphasising not just the suspicious or the ones that could not be explained. I wanted to see all of them." And then he goes on to say, "So I looked at 32 cases. From a Freedom of Information request of the Countess of Chester Hospital in regard to the neonatal ward, we're told that on that unit there were 15 across the whole of 2015 and the whole of 2016. There were 15 early neonatal deaths, that's babies between 0 and 6 days or 7 days. And there were, I'm just going to check that. 0 to 7 days. And there were 2 late neonatal deaths. I think that's 7 to 28 days. I've got to check this. I've just got to check that, sorry. Yes, early neonatal is less than 7 days, so it's 0 to 6 days. And neonatal per se is the first 28 days of life, so late neonatal is from day 7 till 28. So the majority of the babies that died were the early neonatal babies who were, and most of whom are premature and have all kinds of different conditions and needs. So there's 15 early neonatal across 2015 and 2016, both the totality of those years, and 2 late neonatal, total 17. So Lucy is charged with, it's hard to, you've got to track all this information, that Lucy's charged initially with 8 murders, the murders of 8 babies. One of those murders is dropped, and I was told today, very kindly, I've just got to find the file. Sorry, I'm a bit all over the shop. So I was told today, because I was wondering about the 8th murder charge that was dropped, why it was dropped, and who that baby was. I was given some great information from Hermione on Twitter. Thank you, Hermione, who confirmed through the researchers that she'd found out that it was the eighth murder charge was for baby K, who actually died at Arrow Park Hospital, was transferred out. But there was a charge of attempted murder on baby K that was brought against Lucy Letby, but what happened there was a decision couldn't be made. They couldn't come to a verdict on that. There was an interesting, in the Nursing Times, somebody else sent me this, and I can't remember. How do I do that? I'm just going to click something. Gotta click that. Oh yeah. The Nursing Times from the 15th of June 22. So this is the eighth, what was originally the eighth murder charge. And it's the idea that it's the only murder charge in which Lucy was given a not guilty verdict, but it didn't actually appear in the trial. It's Baby K. Baby K didn't die at the, pass on at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She was sent to Arrow Park Hospital and died there. And so they've obviously tried to bring this murder charge against Lucy Letby, saying that the damage that was done in the attempted murder ended up with the death of the baby at another hospital in Arrow Park. I don't know whether that death is counted as one of the 17 deaths from the Freedom of Information Act or not. So it's so hard to really get the final. It's so hard to find out how many babies died across those 2 years. There's all different. Well, 17 is the broad consensus, but then I don't know that there are other views on that there could be more, but it's really hard to be definite about the stats. But this baby, I'm reading from the Nursing Times article. It so happened, it says, in keeping the cases under review, the Mersey Cheshire Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, had decided, this is just before the trial, this is a pre-trial hearing, before the main trial started, they had decided that the legal test for murder is no longer satisfied for one of these cases. It therefore provided no evidence in relation to this count. So that's strange. What happened there? When it got through the CPS as a charge and they accepted it originally, it obviously had the legal test for murder had been met. So what changed it? Was it simply a cynical withdrawing of a murder charge that they felt they couldn't make stick in court, that it was quote unquote weak and it would thereby weaken the other murder charge? Was it as cynical as that? Which on the one hand is so cynical that they would try to prosecute Lucy Letby for that originally, and that they could just withdraw it if they felt it threatened the other murder charges, if you see what I mean, that they would be weakened and then Lucy wouldn't be found guilty for those, because they wouldn't want to risk it and have one not guilty of murder charge, because it could fit, it would tip the others potentially, which sounds incredibly cynical, and what they've put that family through then, bringing a charge of murder and saying that their baby was murdered and then withdrawing it at the last minute. I'm just going to find out what else Hermione said in her message to me in regard to that. She says, Baby K, this is the message I got. There was a simultaneous attempted murder and a murder charge, and that attempted murder charge ended up with no verdict being reached. So there were no guilty verdicts about Baby K at all either. Well, the murder charge was removed at the pre-trial hearing, and the attempted murder there was no verdict. There's some thought here, and this is someone else, not Hermione, but she's talking about somebody else researching this, that on Reddit, saying that the prosecution wanted to withdraw the charge, so it's just not on the docket or whatever they would call it, just not on the listing of charges, but the judge would not let them. So they just wanted to just drop it. The judge didn't let them. And that they were going to bring no evidence, i.e. the CPS were going to bring no evidence. And so that the judge recorded the not guilty on this charge. So it was a finding of not guilty before the main trial started. Baby K, it says it was transferred to Arrow Park, which is, I think, a level 3, more intensive care unit than the level 2 that Chester was at that time, now a level 1. So it's also saying here, basically Baby K was a disaster for the prosecution because of Dr. J and the morphine. Dr. J, that could be Dr. Jayaram. Lucy is quite aggressively interrogated by Johnson, that's the prosecutor, on the second and third desaturation as attempts, i.e. attempted murder, yet she was never charged with those attempts. I think that Dr. J is Dr. Jayaram. That's the thing that he says in his interviews when he comes in there, and he feels that the baby's tube has been deliberately removed, but that never came to a charge of attempted murder. Obviously, there wasn't enough evidence to bring the charge there at all. But strangely, that was the incident that Dr. Jayaram says himself that swung it in his mind, that he then believed that she was guilty of all of that, and he knew what she was doing. And that was a case where that didn't even reach a charge, those other attempts, but there was one other attempt where it was, but the jury didn't reach a verdict. I hope that makes sense. It's trying to get... Yeah, and there is a video in which there's an interchange from the court, or it might be from Lucy Letby's text, where she said, well, I think she's texting a colleague or a friend, or a friend that is a colleague, saying that the baby shouldn't have been there in the first place because Baby K, she was so premature that she shouldn't have been born and allowed to be born in that unit because it didn't have the resources to look after her, and she should have been in somewhere like Arrow Park or Alderhay or the Liverpool Women's Hospital. And that was Lucy Letby's feeling about it. So that kind of explains more. I thought it was always a mystery to me who the 8th murder charge was that was dropped, and it was someone that they tried to then charge. Well, they did charge Lucy Letby of attempted murder, but then no verdict could be reached. But it just seems so odd to me that go through all the probably few years of that family being told that we brought murder charges in relation to your child, and at the very last minute they dropped it, but there's no specific reasons given why they dropped it. Is it pure cynicism that they thought it wasn't as strong as the others, so they would just drop it at the last minute? That kind of, not mealy-mouthed, but kind of vague statement about the legal test for murder is no longer satisfied. So what happened in the interim to make it no longer satisfied? And the implication is there that hitherto it had been satisfied. Back to where I started with Evans's statement about, what he said he wanted. So it's him. So he's saying it's him. He's saying it's him, and in previous videos I've sort of said the idea that, well, it's come from the doctors or it's come from the police and given to him. I think it's a joint enterprise between all three elements. That's what I've come to believe or suspect. They're all on the same page. And this idea, this storytelling of his, that he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about Lucy Letby. He doesn't know anything about a nurse being removed in July 2016, and yet he chooses that as the far end of his range of deaths and crashes he wants to look at. Is that just an accident then? Well, you might say, I suppose, well, he's been told that's the death stopped after that. Well, they didn't entirely know. I mean, there was a later neonatal death in August, so a baby between 7 days and 28 days. There was one in August of 2016. presumably he didn't even want to know anything about that. And then we come to the figure of 32 cases that he ends up with. And he says here early 2015, another vague statement. I mean, he's full of these vague statements. But in another interview in the Talk TV one, he says January. So that's January 2015 until July, inclusive of July. Does he mean up to the end of June or including July? Lucy Letby is off the ward in early July, I think. Well, it is in July, but I'm trying to remember the date. But all of the last crashes and deaths she's blamed for all happen in June. So July is sort of safe again in the minds of Evans, in the minds of the police. The police know where she is, she's not there. And in the minds of the gang of 4 consultants. What information has he had, Evans, now, at that point in time, and where's he got it from to choose July as the end, when he's just read in the newspapers, presumably? Now, he says, I've not listened to the Raj Persaud interview yet, but I've heard that he says in there at some point, I read it in the Sunday papers. But whichever edition, or it's a physical or an online edition he reads it in, does he read it on the 18th of May? That's the earliest, 18th of May 2017. And in those reports they're talking about 15 deaths. They're talking about 15 deaths, so that sounds like they're not including the later neonatal ones for some reason. I don't know why. It's all very... It's not comprehensive, and it's who's governing this? Who's deciding on the range of investigation? It's not the police. It's not the police. The police are being passive, or is it like, I don't know. This is the struggle I've got. I think my suspicions is absolutely there's a triumvirate here. There's a 3-way agreement to make it look like an open investigation, to do, like he says, do them all. But that raises the question, is 32 cases, so that's 32 sets of notes, 32 different children across 18 months, from January 2015, as Evans says, to July, that's 19 months, isn't it, if you include January, February, March, April, May, June, 7 and 12, that's 19-month period. And there are 7. We know there are 16 deaths there, not 17, because the final death in 2016, according to the ONS reports, the Freedom of Information requests, happens in August, and that's outside of his time frame. Did he get every crash and every death that happened in those 19 months then? If he did, because I don't know, I've never seen any information about how many crashes there were across any individual year or any span of time. Are we meant to believe that 32 is the total? And if it's not, if there are more crashes that should have gone into those cases to look at, why didn't they? What did they leave out? But that's a kind of open-ended question, or an unknown, because we don't know how many crashes there were. I don't think they're recorded. I haven't seen anywhere where they're recorded. So somebody's chosen a subset of crashes, I think, sudden deteriorations. And if it's 16 deaths, so they've chosen 16 deaths and 16 crashes, if it's 32 cases. Because the 17th death is in August 2016. So they're trying to say, and maybe it's right, I don't know, but they're saying there are an equal number of deaths and crashes. I would have thought there'd be more crashes over a 19 19-month period than deaths, just based on looking at the stats elsewhere. But I don't know. It just worries me that, again, it's just this manufactured subset of events. And as I've gone through in previous videos, that 32 cases can easily be reduced down to the 15 that Evans reduces it down to. And those 15 cases all have Lucy Letby's name by them. And I saw a more comprehensive look at the rotas there, and they are 15 medical, they're 15 cases, but there's said to be multiple attacks, like 2 or 3 sometimes, attempted murders on individual children, and then that gets reflected in the charge sheet later on, and what's the charges that are brought. It's just really... Just a reminder, the 15 cases are from his first set of reports, which happen, he gets all the notes in July, and his first set of reports are done by November, I believe, of 2017, and it's only in 2018 that the 2 quote-unquote smoking gun cases that Breary finds and then passes on to the police, who then pass it on apparently to Evans. I say apparently because I don't know how this is all working. They're all kind of working together, I think. They're not... Evans makes it sound like he's in the discreet ivory tower in a pure way, looking just at the notes, and then can decipher reality from these pieces of paper that are in this terribly shabby state, and that he can gainsay everyone else who was there at the time in terms of the pathologists doing the post-mortems. He can say, well, no, they've obviously missed it. And he says in this interview, oh, they looked at it the wrong way, meaning the consultant, so they weren't up to it either. And I just was watching the Dr. McLachlan, Norman Fenton video again. And it's the idea that he's been out of practice as a paediatrician for a long time, and his experience in neonatal wards is absolutely minimal. I'm talking about Evans. Absolutely minimal. And yet, he's got this incredible master-like skill level to say, well, everyone else is wrong who's looked at this. They didn't do it the right way. The pathologist missed it. Only I can know. Only I can decipher what's happened. Yeah, so, okay, he's gone to 2015 because he's read in the papers. Why is he cut off at July 2016? Why not the whole of 2016? I think it's a giveaway. Because he knows, again, that the nurse that is suspected, even though he tells us he doesn't know anyone suspected in this interview with Daily Mail, doesn't even know that they're investigating a crime, doesn't know that a crime's been committed, doesn't know that anyone's suspected, doesn't know there's anyone that was there is no longer there, doesn't know anything. He's doing it purely clinically from a very clean, pure standpoint, but happens to choose July 2016, the month where Lucy Letby is transferred out from nursing duties and put into an admin role. Just happens to do that. Why not choose the whole of 2016 if he says it's him that chose them? I think it's much more merged than that, as I say, between him, the police, and the consultants. It's merged between them as this 3-headed hydra. Why choose that? Why choose July? Because there's another death in August 2016. He doesn't seem to want to know anything about it. Because he doesn't want to even look at that. He doesn't want to know anything about it, and the police don't really want him to be bothered with that, and the consultants don't want him to be bothered with that late neonatal death, a baby who's older than 7 days, who died in August 2016. And the reason they don't need or want him to be bothered even looking at that, and he doesn't want to, is because it's post the time that Lucy Letby's left. And I think these things are like not fingerprint, they're clues, basically. I can't think of a better analogy, but they're clues as to what the mindset is, and they're leakage as to what's actually going on. Leakage as to the construction of what they've done here. It's all about appearances. And Hughes, because he's less sophisticated than Evans, and Evans isn't sophisticated, but at least he covers it a bit. But Hughes is so full of himself and such arrogance and bravado, but allied with a rare kind of stupidity to say, well, they were only really it was kind of for show, in order to, when you get to court, that the defence can't attack you. And that's what he's saying retrospectively they were thinking. That the defence can't attack you then if you don't appear to go after... If you appear to go after one person from the beginning, after one thing, as he calls it, I mean, it's just... If you appear to do that, the defence can attack you. It's not that he doesn't do that. It's not that Evans doesn't do that. It's not that the consultants haven't been doing that since summer of 2015. The job at hand, the task at hand, is to make it appear as if you're not doing that. So when you get that list of those crashes and deaths, which begin in June 2015 and carry on to the end of June 2016, so a year period, you've got Lucy Letby on shift for all of those. And I'll keep repeating this because it stunned me when I first came to think about it. It's the absence of what's missing there. The omission is for him to be going en route as he's seeing the first four, and he's writing intended harm, and he knows the babies have died. So, well, that's murder, isn't it? That's what he's saying. He might be saying, I'm not. He says elsewhere, oh, I'm not there to decide whether it's a murder or not. But he's writing intended harm, and the result is death. You intend somebody intends somebody else harm, and they end up dying. That's either manslaughter or murder. So he knows what he's talking about. He's disingenuous at all stages. And sorry, the point there is there's no urgency, and no remembered urgency to say, to question, to wonder, to express to these journalists or any of his other interlocutors when he's sat back and full of himself, to say, oh, I was terribly worried. I was terribly worried that whoever was doing this, it could have been a doctor, could have been a nurse, was still on the ward. Or maybe they were working in another hospital now and killing babies elsewhere. Or maybe they'd been moved to a different department in the hospital and they were killing people there. We've got to find out who they are pronto. We've got to really... There's none of that there. That's just that's cast iron for me, that he knows that who is perceived as the threat and the danger is contained. And so he knows who it is. Because the police certainly know that. And the consultants know that Lucy Letby's not on the ward. So it's part of that construction. I've taken a long time to say that, but this is where the devil is in all this, with his involvement. The devil's in it right from Breary, pointing the finger and choosing, making the first accusation. Breary back in early July, end of June, early July 2015. Starts with Breary, then he gets support from Joy Aram, then probably Gibbs and Dr. B. They've got the bit between the teeth. And then once you've got the police in, and they get this individual, Evans. Lucy's fate is, it shouldn't be sealed, but if we had a decent judiciary, if we had a decent, if she'd have had a decent defence. But they're on the road then. They're on the train to absolutely destroying an innocent person then, and they're not. Once they're on that, they really, really, really don't want to let go. None of them. Thank you.